Whew, what's going on YouTube is Donnie B all day. So it's been a while since we had a heart-to-heart, something to talk about, something to get through. So today's going to be one of those, right? So here we have reached another anniversary for 9/11, right? The 2001 incident where terrorists had taken over a few planes and they flew them into a few things. One of those things, or one of those places, was New York City, right? And I was in my place on the morning of 9/11 when the first plane hit. I get a call from my father, right? And he says, "Donnie, you got to turn on the news." He says, "You got to turn on the news. Something's going down in New York. You got to see this. It's crazy." So I flip on the news real quick, and what do I see? But a plane had accidentally, remember this was an accident after the first one, a plane had accidentally flown into one of the buildings of the World Trade Center. What? You gotta be kidding me. We were blown away. We're sitting there, we're watching this thing, we're like, you have got to be kidding. And at that point, it was thought to be just a little Cessna, a little private plane, right? So we're sitting there and we're watching and we're paying attention to the news and we're seeing what's happening. And, you know, just like all of you, as we're watching, all of a sudden, things change. Things change. Boom, like that. Another plane, a second plane comes in, comes flying around the backside, and boom, hits the World Trade Center. It's a second building, right? At that point, at that moment, that instant, you knew 100% that the first plane, it wasn't an accident. It wasn't a oops, my bad. This was something that was deliberate and intentional. So that made us look even harder. You know what I mean? We continued to watch. We continued to see. And just when you think that things are at their worst, you begin to see what the worst is yet to bring. You started seeing people who were above the floors that were hit, that were burning to death. It was so hot that they had only two options. They had sit there and hold on and hope for rescue while burning to death, or jump. And you can remember seeing bodies jumping out of the Twin Towers, right? So not long after that, when the worst is at its worst, the worst gets even worse. And all of a sudden, here comes one of the buildings straight down. And then after you are trying to catch that inside your mind and you're trying to gather the pieces of reality, once you see that happen, the second one falls, right? So here you are as a human being, and you're sitting watching an accident turn into a surreal moment, turned into hell on earth. And you watched the timeline happen. Boom, 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 right? And at some point, you begin thinking, what can I do? What can I do? So at the time, in those years, I was a constable. I was a sergeant for the Mass Constable Police, right? And I knew I had to work later, but it wasn't, kicking into my head. And work and things like that, nothing was really in my head. The only thing that was in my head was, holy crap, I need to do something. So I go to the local fire department, the main headquarters, and I say, listen, if you guys are going, I would love to be able to go with you. More bodies, the better, type thing, right? And the fire chief said, we're just waiting on a call. As soon as we get a call, I'm going to give you a call, kid. You can definitely ride out with us. Right on, good. So a couple hours go by, or an hour goes by, maybe even less than that, and I call again. Did you guys get the call? No. Did you guys get the call? Called 3 times. 3 times, and the last time, his answer to me was, "No, we're still waiting." And I said, "You're waiting?" I said, "People are dying. We can't wait." So at that time, this is after both buildings fell, and before they, you know, there was another small building that was coming down, and so I put on my SWAT jacket. Boom! I had some jeans on, and I put on a pair of boots, and had my gun on my side. And at the time, I had longer hair, and it was pulled back. It was kind of almost like a mohawk, but it was around the top and pulled back. And I just got in my truck. I put my light on the top of my truck, and I started heading down the highway. Now, I live close enough to New York City to know it's just a straight shot down the highway, but I don't go there enough to navigate through the city and know where I'm going. So I'm cutting down 91 from Massachusetts into Connecticut, and just as I hit Hartford, where 91 and 84 cross, this big medical convoy is coming off of 84 going down 91, and just as they're coming off, I say, well, that's my ride. So I kind of get in the back of them, and then the state troopers get in the back of me, and the state troopers get in the front of the whole thing, and we just fly down the road. We ended up in Fort Lee, New Jersey, and we parked at the high school there, and it's where they began setting up all this medical equipment and some emergency preparedness, right? The place was mobbed. It was crazy. Things were all over the place. So I get out of my truck. I'm parked there. Now the smoke from the New York City was so big. This was so huge that I'm in Fort Lee, New Jersey, and it looked like it was right down the block. And I'm thinking, wow, it's got to be right there. It's got to be right. I'm very, very close. I could probably get there from here. I had no idea. I didn't even know where I was. Fort Lee to the city. I had no idea. So I'm not with the medical guys, so I'm not setting up medical. At this point, I'm just trying to figure out what I can do. So there's detail cops everywhere working the streets, right? They're all over the place, just everywhere. And I think to myself, all right, well, these guys are just standing here. I'm going to go to the DPW, which they had like a little opening and something I could see in, and there was workers in there, and they had the big orange Gatorade jugs, you know. So I grabbed a wheelbarrow from them and one of those jugs full of water and a bunch of cups, and I started going around to the police officers that were working detail doing traffic and giving them water, right? And there's only so much water you can hand out before you start feeling like you're not doing enough. The time there, it's just useless. And that's exactly how I felt. I felt like no matter what I was doing, it wasn't enough. And I realized that I was too far away from the city to make an impact for the city, right? To do something with the city. And so you kind of get like a little depression, like, great, now what? You know, there's nothing else I can do. So I go over to the Fort Lee police barracks, and everything was so crazy that they brought a table outside on the sidewalk, and there's a lieutenant, big guy, lieutenant sitting outside at this table, and I walk up to him and I said, hey man, I said, just wondering where the officers are going to give blood so I can at least feel like I've done something here. And so he looks at me, he says, well, hold on kid, let me go find out. So lieutenant gets up and he goes inside, and he's gone for about 10 minutes. I'm just standing there, and finally he comes outside, and his exact words to me, his exact words that I'll never forget: forget the blood, kid, they need you downtown, everybody's dying. That's exactly what he said to me. No problem. Now my mindset to go in here was to save as many people as I can, even at the cost of my own self. So I didn't think I was coming back. I didn't think that there was going to be a September 13th for me, or September, even maybe a September 12th for me. I wasn't sure that was going to happen, and I was prepared for it. So the officer sets me up with a tow truck driver who is going to drive me over the bridge to get me to a point where there's cops there waiting for me to get me in a subway to get as close as I can before the subway stops running, because it's just too dangerous after this point. So I call my father up on the phone and I said, listen, because I didn't tell him where I was going. I didn't tell him where I was. I didn't tell my work I left. I called up and I said, listen, I'm going into the city. I said, not sure if I'm going to make it back. And my father's words to me was, you know, do what you got to do, buddy. It's exactly what he said. And that was it. I shut off the phone, and that's the last phone call I made until I was home. So I get on this tow truck and boom, go across the bridge, and we get there and there's 3 police officers waiting at the bottom, and they bring me down to the subway system. They get me to the subway police there. I think it's the MBTA or Port Authority police something, and they get me onto a train, and boom, I'm gone. There was very few people on the subway at the time, and it was very, very somber. It was very quiet, right? And so they get me to like an end of the line type thing where this is as far as we can go, and I get out, and there's a couple of cops there, and I tell them, you know, okay, this is, and they said, yep, we got the call for you. This is what you need to do. You need to go this way, and there's going to be a checkpoint. So I start walking down the street, right? I mean, smoke just in the air, not where I am. It's, you can see it, but it's not, the ash wasn't all over the city. Really crazy. It was just going up almost. But I get to a military checkpoint. I pull out an ID, and boom, I walk in. Then I hit another checkpoint, pull out the ID, boom, I walk in. Then I hit a last checkpoint. There's 3 checkpoints before I finally got to the ash, got to the stuff, right? And I go through, and what I'm seeing, I can't even comprehend, you know what I mean? Every single thing you saw, every single thing was one color. It was gray. Every single thing there was just gray. So I come between these 2 buildings, and I can already see a couple of cars and a motorcycle where the farther you went, the less stuff was on them. Once I got past these first couple blocks, you see cars that had no paint. They had no rubber, no steering wheel, no seats. The metal inside the seats was there, but no seats, no nothing. The steering wheels, the dashboards, everything was gone. The only way you could tell a police car from a civilian car was the cage that separated the back seat from the front seat. That's the only way you could tell. Everything else was melted off or blown off. It was just nuts. So I walk through these 2 buildings, and I end up where there's a hook and ladder fire truck with a hose going into one of the craters, right? And when I say craters, I mean these were craters, like 7-story craters that was formed when these buildings came down. And I'm not going to get into any conspiracy theories and any of that. I'm just going to tell you my story. So I get there, and I'm thinking, well, what can I do here? There's just a fire engine. There's no people running around, and you know, this is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking I'm going to see a mass hysteria of people. I'm seeing nothing. I'm seeing one fire truck spraying a hose into a hole of fire. I'm thinking, what am I going to do here, right? So I bang a left, and I start walking, and I get into an opening, and I mean, the ground, besides being 3 inches thick of ash, the ground was literally like papers. That's one thing I remember, is papers from these buildings. When they came down, all the papers from the offices just everywhere. And I thought that was really weird, that you're standing in an area where there's burning hell and all the paper survived, but it was just everywhere. So as I start walking forward, I get to a point where there is a huge hole, right there in an intersection, big hole right in the center of the ground, and across from it was a subway entrance. So I'm alone. I'm not with a group. I'm not with my squad or anything like that. I'm by myself, me and a flashlight. So I'm thinking, well, what am I going to do? And before I get to this point, I hit, I think I hit the first precinct there, and somebody told me to go in and get a mask, and there's a reason I can't wear a mask today, and Ground Zero is that reason. So I go in and I get myself a little paper mask. And I come out, and there's a bunch of New York City cops right there, and they're all just beat, man. They're fucking beat, and not doing great. And you can see that they were pissed, and they had the right to be. But here I come, guy with slick back ponytail in the back of the head, little SWAT jacket, jeans with some jungle boots, and you know, the gun on my side, and one of these cops looks at me and he just goes, "Special Forces, fuck." And I just gave him a look like, dude, now's not the time. And I said, I'm a constable, you know what I mean? You know, I just kind of ignored him. I gave him a look and then just kept walking. None of his buddies said a thing. They kind of knew, like, all right, he's just mad. So you kind of he's seen stuff already that I hadn't seen yet. You know what I mean? I just haven't seen it yet. He's watched his buddies go, right? So I just keep going, and I end up in this subway thing, and I'm going down, and as I'm walking down the stairs of this subway, I hear a guy come running up behind me. And I look back, and there's a guy with a little vest and a hard hat. And he says, "Hey, you going down there?" I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Good." Because I wanted to go down, but I didn't want to go down alone. Which made me think, well, I'm really stupid because I was going down there by myself. So we get down, and you have the turnstile, and then a door that like opens one way but would lock from the other side. So we had to pry it open. And we start walking. And we start walking in the direction of the destruction underground. And if you've never been in a subway in New York, you see there's mosaic tiles everywhere, right? Little square tiles. And we're walking in, all the trains were stopped, and we don't know if these are trains that were stopped and evacuated or trains that had been there when these fell. So we're in there with flashlights, and we're just yelling, "Hello, hello, hello," waiting to hear a hello back or a help back. And as we walked, we were on there's like a little ledge. So the subway looks like this, and then there's little ledges, and then the tracks. So we were on these ledges, which are really narrow, and we're just kind of scooting along. And the farther we get, the more ceiling is falling on our heads. And so we get to a certain point, and he looks at me and he says, "Hey man, I can't keep going." He goes, "I got to get out of here." And I was like, "Don't worry." I said, "I'm just going to go a little bit further." I said, "I got you." So I told him, I said, "Just leave the door. Make sure the door is good." So I walk a little bit further. I'm looking in some trains, and there was nothing. I mean, there's no voices. There was no nothing. I turn around and I leave. I come out, and I continue to the left, and I come around a corner, and that's where I see the people. People everywhere, just headless chickens running around, right? And I didn't know it at the time where I was about to enter, but I make a right where there's a bunch of people and there's a bunch of to do, and so I go over to join the to do to help. And what it was is I was at the entrance of a hole inside one of the fallen buildings, and they were saying that we're gonna help, we're gonna get somebody out, we got to get somebody out. So I went to help get this guy out. And what we did is I got to the end of the hole, and just as I get there, and there's already police officers inside the hole, so there's no reason for me to go in, so I'm at the outside of the hole. And as I look, people just start running. They're all coming to where we are, and they get in a line, and so now we're forming this giant line from this hole all the way to where an ambulance is, way down at the street. So this police officer, I think it's Port Authority Police, his name is Will Gimeno. I found this out after watching the movie, and it took me years to do so. I had no idea who this guy was until I watched it. I think it was 9/11 or something like that. I can't remember which movie it was, but it was about the two police officers who got trapped under the building, and one shot himself. And so when the police officers got down there, they hear this guy talking to another person, and they found, and there was two other guys. They found the one who had shot himself, and then there was still another guy. And in the movie, I think he was played by Nick Cage, and but he was still alive, and the cops didn't even know. They had no idea at the time. So I'm at the hole, and I could see him coming with the stretcher, and it's coming through. So as soon as it gets to the door, I reach, I grab my right hand, and then I grab my left hand, and I take my right hand, and I place it on Will. All right, I place my hand on this guy, and I see the guy across from me does the same thing. He gives him a little pat, and then as I turn my head and I look, as the stretcher goes down hand by hand by hand by hand, every single person down the line gave him a little pat, gave him a "we got you, buddy" type thing. And as soon as that was gone, we kind of started to disperse, because we didn't know there was another guy alive down there. So we to the best of our knowledge, he was the only one coming out. So just beyond where this hole is was kind of like the crater's lip, right? It was just a big mound of stuff. So I start climbing, and I'm like, well, I'm by myself, so I need to see what I can do. You know, I need to search on my own. And I go over the top of this mound, over the top of this crater, and I'm just looking at there's nothing, just devastation. And this fireman comes up behind me and he yells, "Hey!" And I'm thinking he's saying, "Yo, get your ass out of there. That's dangerous. You can't be there." But what he said to me was, "Do you see anything? Do you find anybody?" And I was like, "No, there's nothing." So there's voids, is what we call voids, big holes all over the place. And so I start moving some stuff to look in holes, and we're yelling down the holes. And we're on the top, and I move this piece of metal, and he's right behind me. This fireman's right behind me. So he grabs it and he kind of throws it. And he goes, "Yeah, maybe if we move this, we can see better." So we start moving this metal. Now these people come, and it starts this train, just like with the stretcher, this train of us moving this metal. Not the I-beams, obviously. It was all like light metal. It was weird. It was almost like guardrail material. It was really, really weird. I don't know what it was from, but I know it was there. So we start moving it, and we're just poking our heads into holes, yelling hello. And that's how we were either finding people or finding people who didn't make it, by smelling for burning flesh. And we did a lot of poking heads into holes and yelling. So I come off of this hill, and I end up in an area where it was like I think it was a restaurant, right? And I'm guessing it was either an outdoor seating or there was glass or something, because it was wide open, but it was like under part of a corner of a building. And as I walk into a certain area where there had been fire, I would step into this ash, and in certain places, the where it was still hot underneath, little flames would come out and they'd go up my leg. And I'm just in there yelling for the hello, hello, hello. And I get out of there, and I come to a point where there's a fire truck sitting that was completely just bad, man. It was bad. And next to the fire truck there was a huge opening, something you could actually drive down. It was a ramp going down under the buildings, and then there was a couple shops, and there was a set of stairs and an escalator that went up to a door. So the first thing I did was, and this is where it gets crazy, man. I went up these stairs, right? And I looked at the ash, and there's no footprints. There's no indication that anybody's been up there. So I figure I'm gonna go, right? And so I walk up these stairs, and I get to the top, and there's a door. I open up the door, and I realized where I was, and I was in like a big child daycare center, right? A daycare. And the greatest thing that you could ever hope to see when walking into a daycare that has suffered devastation like this, that's in one of the fallen buildings, I noticed every chair was pushed in, everyone, and at that point you get like this feeling of relief, like, wow, they had time to push in their chairs, you know what I mean? And it's the stupid little things that click to you, right? So here I am, I'm in this room, it's a big rectangle, right? I walk in, and there's a door to my right with a wall, and then the room goes off to the left with another door out that way. So I decide to walk through the room to the left, through the next door, and I get to a hallway, and you can exit the child daycare center from that hallway, or you can make a right, and then there's another door to the left that goes to the other side, right? It's like a big U. The door that was an exit out of the child daycare center, there was no more building there, it was gone, right? So I couldn't leave that door, there was nothing. So I walk through and I come around the other side and I enter another hallway, and everything was good in there, right? So I walk down this hallway, and there's two doors on the left, on this left hallway wall. So the first one I walk in, and it was a crib room, just a few cribs in there, and everything was in great order and everything was looking good. So I come out of that room and I walk to the next one, and I open up the next door, and it's another crib room, but this one was big. It's a big crib room. But just like the last one, all the cribs were in good order. There was no indicators that, you know, anything bad happened in there. So when you leave the crib room, you get to the end and you get to a door which opens up to a little hallway. Now you can go left into this hallway, which is an exit door out of the child daycare center, but you can't go left because there's no more building. You can only go right, which leads you back into the child daycare center, right? So I make a right, and I was blown away. The entire wall of this daycare center was glass, a glass wall, and what you've seen outside of this wall was a crater on fire. A crater literally on fire right outside this wall, made of glass with no cracks. No cracks, no breaks in this wall. And you're looking at this devastation everywhere. This building above me has fallen, it's down. It's down until the level I'm at. That's the last level. And everywhere outside of this one area is down, but this glass wall sustained, right? And the only thing I noticed was teddy bears were all over the floor, but it's because they were shaken off their shelves, not because of anything bad. So as I walk out of this room, I end up into the first room I entered. And that's when it hit me. That's when I realized how crazy this is. The only part of that building from that floor up that was left was the child daycare center. It was the child center. It was the only part of that building left standing. If a person never believed in God, you walk into that and you see every single part of a building destroyed except one part, man, that'll reach you. And if it doesn't, there's nothing that could be done for you. There's nothing. So I come downstairs and I leave this area, and I end up in a key shop, right, where they make keys. And I check that place, there's nobody in there. So then I go inside this big doorway that with the ramp, and I start going down. And you're just going down, down, down. And eventually, as it goes down, a floor is, you know, like this. So then the windows are triangular like this, right? And so they're long, thin windows that kind of go to a point. And so I start flashing a flashlight in there. I realize it's a CVS. So I'm thinking, wow, maybe somebody got trapped in there. And so I'm looking through this window with my flashlight, and that's when I seen her. I seen this beautiful face staring back at me, right? I mean, eye contact straight up. And when you're in a place on fire, when you're in a place where terrorists have just struck at your heart, and your whole goal is to find somebody, and you see that one person, your chest jumps out of, your heart jumps out of your chest. It's a feeling that I can never ever describe to you. So I look and I see her and I gasp, and I'm stopped. I'm stunned that somebody is there. And that's when I realize it wasn't a person. It was a magazine cover for a fashion magazine. And it was a full-size cover of a head, a full life-size head of this woman. And seeing it and knowing that there was a person, I was ready to help. And it not being a person broke my heart. It just stopped me in my tracks and changed my entire world at that one moment. To see that when you see a person that's not a person, that needed your help but doesn't, it's the worst feeling I could ever describe. So just completely disheveled, out of my mind, I start walking a little further, and that's when things are just parts of the top are still coming down. It's pretty bad in there, and I see a helmet for a riot officer's helmet sitting there on the ground, and what that tells me is he wasn't hot and he took it off and he was like, I can't really see with this, I'm just going to leave it here on the floor. That means something so bad happened that they ran so hard and so fast that his helmet flew off, and he never said, holy crap, let me stop and get that. He left it. That's how bad it was for them when they were in that hole as that building fell. And so I pick up his helmet and I bring it out and I bring it to the first cop I see, and I say, listen, man, I found this there. And they take it. So I continue around, and I'm in search at this point for a bottle of water. So I go into this building. It's like a men's department store over here. It's big, like black building, and there's a square in the middle where you can walk, around the building on the inside, and it's just, the department store is where the makeshift morgue was. That's where bodies were being brought into, and all around is where EMTs were helping firemen and police officers and rescuers who couldn't breathe anymore. After 16 hours, people were dying. People were dying from the intake of exhaust that they were getting, all that bad air. So these guys had been there since the beginning, and they just needed help, right? So that's what this building was. So I get a bottle of water and I come out of there and I start walking up, and I come to an area where another crater was, and across from that was a building, a big tall building. And I don't know if this was part of the building I was just in or a different one, but I look up and I can see the windows and I can see the things, and I started thinking to myself, I wonder if anybody is in these buildings. So I go through a back door and up a stairwell where I had to put a rock inside the door to keep it open. And I go up and I start investigating floors to look for anybody, right? And I find nothing. So as I'm getting ready to leave, some guys come up, I don't know if they were fire or police, but they were some kind of media that had to do with one or the other, because they had some kind of badge, but also cameras, and they were coming to shoot from the windows to see, to get a good vantage point. And so they were coming in. They said, they asked me as they caught me in the hallway. They said, is this a good area to see from above? And I said, yeah, actually you can see everything from the window. So they went in there and they took a shot. So as I'm walking down, I go down the hallway, and where I think I was in the floor where I entered, I wasn't. I was on a different floor where the door was not perched open. And I'm thinking to myself, holy shit, these guys, they accidentally locked us in. You know what I mean? So I'm over there like pulling on the door and going crazy, and that's when I realized I was one floor off. I went down and I finally got out. Neither here nor there, but it's just part of what happened, and I want to tell you guys as much as what I can pull out of my brain. So I get to this crater. There's like an old Burger King, beat up Burger King right here, and one of the genius guys out there found some way to get the grill going and was actually cooking burgers for rescuers, saying, you guys got to eat, right? So I went in and I got some food, and I remember there was somebody in there. They brought in a box of socks, just a box of socks, right? Big box of white socks. And people started fighting because one guy take 2 pairs of socks. And I'm like, man, this what we're dealing with right now, how much we all need to band together to fight over 2 pairs of socks. I mean, at some point it had to be let go, and finally everything got calmed down and everything was good, and I mosey on out of there and I get to this crater, right? And this is where I spend pretty much the rest of my time, just looking for bodies, looking for people. And at one point, a dog starts going crazy, starts sniffing around, digging, going nuts. And so I come up there, and the guys are looking for whatever the dog is barking at, but there was a steel plate. Almost looks like one of those where there's road constructions and they put a plate over the hole and you drive over the plate so you don't fall in it. It kind of looked like that. So these guys were trying to like dig around the edges, and I said, move, and I just ran over and I grabbed this plate, and with all my, everything I had, literally, like all my essence, I freaking pick up this plate and I just move it. And the dog is pinned right there with his nose on the ground. And the dog wasn't wrong. There was nobody there, but the dog wasn't wrong. It was people who were disintegrated. It was human ash. And the dog is smelling people that weren't even there, just what was left over of them was there. And it was the craziest thing. And that's when you realize half of this ash, or not half of this ash, but a lot of this ash that you're breathing in is human remains. And to let that sink into your head, it's just a weird feeling. So then off to the left, down off of the slope I was on, these guys come across what looked like a couch cushion from the 80s, when you unzip the couch cushions and you pull out this big yellow square cushion. It kind of looked like that with rounded edges. And they were like looking really weird at it. So I'm watching them trying to figure out what they're doing. And they flip it over, and it was the body of a woman, and her legs, arms, and head were almost like fully tucked into herself, like she had jumped or got crushed and landed into herself. And it was just like, you don't realize how bad it is until you see it. Like, you don't realize the impact until you're there. And so I start walking. I keep going up, and I step on one I-beam, and there was a void in between the I-beams, and I cross over an I-beam, and behind me is like I think he was a power lines worker or some kind of electric worker for the city. And as we were walking together, I stopped in my tracks, and I turned around, and he pauses, and he goes, "What's going on?" And I said, "Look at this." And I point down, and I said, "Does that look like a femur to you?" And there was like a leg cut off at the top of the leg, completely cut off, and the ball of the femur was sticking out of the top. And that's what caught my eye. The meat of the leg was completely browned. It was just cooked. And the guy goes, "Holy shit, that's a leg." And we had little tags, little flags that we were marking for where we found things, because when you're out there trying to rescue people who could still be living, you don't want to spend all your time recovering. So we put flags wherever we find bodies or body parts. That's how you to let them know where to recover later. So that was just a nutty situation. And then I get to the top of this mound, and I see this fireman, and he's sitting kind of with his hands in his head. Then I walk over to him, and I put my hands on him, and I say, "Man, you okay?" And he says, "Yeah, I'm doing a lot better than those poor bastards over there." And he points and at what looked like maybe a stairwell or something. It was body, like just zigzagged. One of the bodies is a big person who their clothes were completely removed from being crushed in the fall. And one of the bodies that stuck out to me was a guy. And the reason it stuck out to me is because he was completely distorted and twisted, and his hand was kind of like this. Under one arm is locked dead straight and stiff. And what caught me about this one body above the others was he had a wedding ring on. And I started thinking to myself, I said, this guy came to work early this morning. I said, who knows what the last words to his family were? What if the night before his kids were being a little bad, and it was, all right, good, you get bedtime with no dinner? What if what is an argument with a wife? What if it was, I'm going to wake up early in the morning so I go to work, but I'm not going to bother giving you a kiss goodbye because I don't want to wake you up type thing. And this guy plays a pretty big significance in the rest of my life. Different story for a different day. But what happened was, I knelt down next to this guy, and I put my hand on his hand, his wedding ring hand, and I said a prayer for him. It was the only one I did that for. And it means something later, but something completely different. And so that was the only one I did that for, but it was just a very crazy situation. So now a couple hours or a few hours into the search, it's nighttime. And it's getting dark, and I meet up with a bunch of constables from Pennsylvania, and so we're all kind of searching the same area. And there's a void, like a shaft that runs straight down into like alongside of this pit, and I want to check it out. I want to see if there's anybody worth, or not worth, but anybody to recover in there or anybody to find. So I tell one of these guys, I say, listen, man, I'm going to put my head inside this hole. I said, if you don't see my feet no more, because I had my feet on the top, like holding my body up. And I said, if you don't see my feet no more, that means something happened. I said, come look for me. And he's like, yeah, definitely. So I put my head in there, and it's hot in there, man. I'm wearing my SWAT jacket is nylon, right? It's a black nylon jacket. And it's so hot, I could feel like the jacket like clinging to me. And while my head is in there and I got my flashlight and I'm yelling hello, hello, and trying to smell for something, that's when this big bang happens and the earth shook. I mean, just crazy bang and shake. And I have no idea what this is, but all I know is my feet released and I tumbled all the way to the bottom of the shaft. And I end up on an I-beam at the bottom, and I'm just laying there, just not moving. Not because I couldn't move, but because I didn't want to, because I needed time to figure out what was that, what just happened. And just before that, I think it was just before that. I thought it was just after, but I think it was just before that. And this was nighttime. It may have been like 2 in the morning on September 11th to the 12th, going overnight. We know that air traffic is grounded. There's nobody in the air, right? And I crap you not on this, guys. There's 1,000 people moving, helping, doing, lifting, pushing, aiding. And this sound comes through the air. And this is very, very true. And anybody who is there overnight from September 11th will tell you this. A chopper was heard overhead. And in a single moment, every single rescuer there stopped and looked up, because we knew that there was nothing in the air. And we also knew that we were hit by the air. And we literally stopped, and every single person focused up. You couldn't see up because it was just gray. But we all stopped, and probably for, I want to say like 15 seconds, there was dead silence. And then once we realized, it must be one of our people, it must be media or something, everybody just turned and kept going, doing what they were doing. After that is when the bang happened. And so I'm laying there, and I think this may have even been the morning. I'm laying there, and I just am hot. I am burning up. My jacket is beginning to melt to me because this I-beam is so hot. And I'm saying to myself, I have to get out of here. I can't stay in this tunnel, right, in this tube. So I start to peer out. I get my hands at the top. I climb up, and I start to peer. And the first thing I see is boots just standing there, right, not moving. And I'm thinking, what are these guys doing? And then the single worst thing you will ever see when you're in a rescue situation like this, from the point where we were and all the people at the bottom, they were running, but they weren't running like toward us. They were running away from us. The place where we stood, where we were, where our feet were, everybody was running from that area. So here's the thing: is just before I went down the hole, we got a rope and we lowered 6 guys into this crater, because there was a parking garage on the far side, right? And people hadn't gone down there yet. There's a building with a big piece of this building structure that you've seen, that big metal structure that was all crossed, hanging, literally dangling out of one of these buildings, and it was swaying. So my first thought when this big bang happened was that fell. That's what I thought. But we just got these guys down in the hole, and they were walking a very thin line around the edge to try to get to this thing when this bang happened. And now they are frozen, like, oh crap, what do we do? They're in a 2,000 degree pit, right? At the bottom of this pit is 2,000 degrees, and they're on the wall of it. They're basically in a volcano. So we are just standing there now thinking, what do we do? And that's when this cop at the bottom is standing at the bottom while people are running, and he yells up to us. And I will never ever forget this. And I really hope that one of the guys from Pennsylvania, one of the constables, is watching this and can hear this. He said words I'll never forget. This cop yells to us. He says, "Everybody get out of there. You're going to die." Exactly what he said to us. So now we're looking at each other like, what? And so I yell back down, what are we going to, I yelled back, "We got guys in the hole." My exact words. And the words that were said back to me will echo in me forever. He said, "Leave them. You're going to die." We were there as an all-in or all-out type of position, right? Where we were willing to die to save people, so I was not willing to leave. And just after he says that, here comes a guy in fatigues. And now I know in the movie it showed some guy, a Marine, and I don't know what this guy was. I don't know, Marine, Army. He was wearing jungle fatigues, but he comes running. Boom, just running. And he's got a rope with him, or the rope that was there. And he comes running up. He was the only one that came in our direction, right? And when he got to the top, because I just yelled, "We got guys in the hole," and he was down there, and he must have just heard it and said, "Well, then let's get him." He comes up and he says these words. He says, "Anybody who doesn't want to die, go now." He says, "We're either going to get him out and all live together, or we're going to all die trying." And there was these three guys, not the Pennsylvania guys, not the constables. They stayed. But these three other guys, I have no idea who they were working with or what. They ran, gone, see ya. And we were like, "Shh, okay, now what?" So the guy takes the rope and he throws it down, and I'm a big dude, so I'm like, all right, I'm going to anchor. So I tie this thing around my waist, and I have the back, and I'm holding on with everything I have. Then these Pennsylvania guys are holding a rope, and they're getting ready to pull. And this military guy, this soldier, Marine, whatever he was, gets this rope down, and we start pulling these guys out, right? One after another. They start climbing up this rope. And as soon as the last guy is out, they all start going down, and I'm untying myself. So I run right behind this soldier. And as soon as I get to the bottom, I stop and I turn to look up to see what it is that's making us run. Why are we out of there with such vicious fury? And this cop running by grabs my shirt and just yanks me. He's like, "Don't you understand? You're going to die if you don't get out of here." And I said, "What am I going to die from?" Like, I wanted to know. He grabs me and he turns me around, and I look up at this building, and it's like this. And apparently a crane that was moving metal, I guess from what I was told, hit the building. And the building was, and that was the building that ended up, I believe, having, they had to take it down on purpose after that. It was structurally unsound. So what the thinking was is this thing's going to come down on our heads. And to me, that's a pretty damn good reason to run. So we start bailing. Boop, we go down this little side street, and we end up at the corner where that big church is. And so we get out of there, and we all stop running at that point, and we're all just kind of looking and holding on and waiting to see what's going to happen. So I walk around, I make a right, and I end up on the other side where the water's on my left, and there was a big medical tent, and there was another void. So there's a couple guys over there, and they have a ladder in the void. So I go over there, and we go down into the void, and bam, we find another body. And we found another body, and that's when some people, I don't know who they were, if they were police or FBI, they come out and they clear us out. They're like, "Guys, you got to get out of there. It's unsafe. Right now, we have to evacuate." So, and we can understand it because, we're at a point where we're trying to rescue people, and the more bodies that, we're trying to recover, the less people who are living we can recover. So it makes sense, clear the area. So so I come out of this hole, and there's the tent, right? So I go over to the tent, and I ask if they can flush my eyes out and wash my hands and this and that. So it was a Red Cross tent. So the ladies flushed my eyes, and the whole thing with the mask is I was probably about 4 hours into my time at Ground Zero. At one point, I took off the mask to breathe, and the inside was black, completely black from what I was breathing out. And it's because of what I was breathing in, and that's why I'll never wear a mask again. I can't. My lungs are just jacked up from that. But So she's cleaning me out and they're giving me water. And then I said, can I wash my hands? They were just black. My gloves, at one point, one of them had cooked a hole in the center from grabbing a hot piece of steel. So my gloves were just torn up. They were no good anymore. So I just trashed them. So my hands were just completely black. So they start scrubbing my hands, and the lady looks at me and she says, your hands aren't dirty. She says, your hands are burnt. And later I found out that my feet and my hands, from the gloves and the boots, cooked from the inside, kind of like an oven. So for a whole year, I couldn't make a fist. And still, my fist, it feels really tight. When I make a fist, it feels tight at the end. And to this day, so it's, it got to the point where my hands weren't working very good, my feet weren't working very good. I was bleeding from my side. I took a puncture wound when I fell down the shaft. I took a puncture wound to my upper leg, right in my hip, and my leg was all jacked up, and I could barely walk. I was on one leg at that point, and that's when I realized to keep going, I was just a body in the way, and I was going to be something that somebody had to take care of instead of taking care of somebody who needed it, right? So I talked to a cop, and I said, listen, I said, how do I get back to Fort Lee? This is 26 hours straight in the hole. People were dying after 16 hours, and I was by myself, so I figured I'm going to stay until my last moment, to the last time I can. And I reached it. I reached that time. And so this New York City police officer, she puts me in her car, and she starts driving me out toward the bridge. And the whole time I'm in there, I'm like a robot. I'm just doing what I'm doing. I'm getting it done. Job, this has to be done. 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 Just doing it. And nothing clicked to me at this point. But as we're driving out, we get past the last checkpoint, and that's where, oh man, it was awful. There was people everywhere holding signs. You're a hero. We love you. Thank you. This and that. And it wasn't until that moment, that one period of time, where I broke down. That I lost it, man. I mean, I was done. Here I was leaving. I was on my way out. I was see you latering it. And I felt like I was abandoning the situation. And these people are telling me that I'm a hero. These people are telling me, oh yeah, thank you for what I'm leaving. And it took me a very, very long time to forgive myself. A very long time to forgive myself. And I would not allow to be called, people to call me a hero. I wouldn't accept it. And I was, a year after Ground Zero, I was given an award. I was given an award for heroism from the Red Cross. I was a two-time decorated American hero, and that was the first one. And the second one came with the military long time after. But my best friend, my brother Chad, I made him take that award, that thing that they gave me that said heroism, and I had him put it in his closet because I didn't want to look at it. And it stayed in his closet for years until he sold his house and he was moving down south, and he said, hey, I still have this. And at that point, I think I was ready to take it, but I wasn't at that point ready to display it. So that's kind of how that went. And leaving New York that day was the worst feeling I've ever experienced. Being called a hero for evacuating didn't sit very well with me. But that was that. It is what it is. So I get back to Fort Lee, and they drop me off at the barracks, and there's a lieutenant sitting outside, a different lieutenant, skinny guy, salt, pepper hair. And I tell him that, I said, I just got to get out of here. And he looks at me and he says, there's no way, because you're not leaving like this. And he could see I was just jacked, man. I mean, emotionally, physically, I was jacked. And I I'd asked him if I can get some water. And so he brings me to the cafeteria in the Fort Lee, New Jersey police barracks, this big cafeteria. And he sits me down, he says, "You're getting food." And I said, "I don't want food, I just want to leave." And he said, "No, you're not leaving." He said, "You're going to eat and you're going to relax a bit." So I go down to this cafeteria and they get me some food, and I'm sitting down at this table, and I'm the only non-New Jersey guy there inside this room, and the TVs were on, and it's just constant showing it, bam, 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 over and over again, showing everything. And I mean, these guys knew where I came from because I was gray. I was 100% gray. As a matter of fact, I'm going to show you guys something that I've never shown publicly, and only probably 5 people in the world have ever seen this. When I was walking on my way out, I saw color, which was the first bit of color I'd seen in my entire time there. And it caught my eye from maybe 100 yards away, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. So I went and I picked it up. This was 3 blocks away. This was the only thing I saw that had color on it. You can see there's still gray on there. There's still ash on there. But this flag was the only color I saw from Ground Zero. And I walked over and I picked it up. And this flag has been with me every single second of my life. Not on my body, but in my possession since that day. This thing will never, ever not be part of my life. This flag represents so much of what I believe and who I am that it's unexplainable. And you can see this, it's melted together, it's fused together because of the fire. Wherever this blew out of, wherever this escaped from, it left its position to land in my hands. It was made for me to find. And this flag is a very, very strong tell of what life was like inside Ground Zero. So I'm inside, just me and my flag. I'm inside these police barracks and I'm watching this, and my hands are shaking. I'm trying to eat. I got tears coming out of my eyes watching this footage. And this guy, New Jersey cop, don't know his name, don't know who he is. I couldn't even describe his face. I could just describe that he was a big dude. Not big dude, but big dude. And a group of them are at a table, right? A group of these New Jersey guys. And I'm the only one covered in ash. I'm covered in ash, head to toe. And he sees me as he's walking by, and they all kind of go by, and he's the last one. And as he walks by, and I'll never forget this, man. I'll never forget. This breaks me every time. He puts his hand on my shoulder, and he's just like, "You're gonna be okay." And I couldn't even muster a real word. I'm just like, and I'll never. There's a reason I'm wearing glasses today. I'll never forget that moment, right? So once I was healed up and doing good, and I felt like I could accomplish running at basic training and doing all the things I could do, I joined the Army. And the first thing I did was volunteer for war. This is one of my patches that I wore in combat. Cowboy Sebop is the owner of one of my patches that I wore, 2 of my patches that I wore in combat. And the reason these mean so much to me is why I wear them. I would have never joined the military. I wasn't that kind of guy. I wasn't the guy that was going to live my life by somebody else's direction. Live my life by, this is when you're waking up, this is when you're going to bed, this is when you're eating. No, that wasn't me. That wasn't me. But after that flag, it became me. So I'm gonna end it here, guys. But before I do, and I really hope you held on this long, because what I'm about to show you is devastating to a lot of people to think about what life was like there. My everything I was wearing, all my clothing was trashed, was gone. My gun belt trashed, everything. My jacket melted, my shirt was just garbage, everything. I saved one thing that I was wearing, one thing, and that was my boots. And I'm going to show you my boots, because I want you to see what life was like inside Ground Zero. These were my boots. This is what I wore inside the hole. These boots were burnt and devastated. You can see these are jungle boots, and if you ever owned a pair of jungle boots, you know you can take them through anything and they're going to survive. These boots are beasts. And you see all this ash and soot and everything. This was me. This was me. This is what I walked through. This is what I lived. This pair of boots that still have ash and residue on the inside of them. This broken down pair of boots. This is what protected me and kept my feet going. But these boots are decorated in the ash of the buildings and the human beings that were lost there. This right here, when people say never forget, and they say, will you ever forget 9/11, or can you ever forget 9/11? These boots right here are a very, very strict reminder of why I myself will never, ever, ever be able to forget what I went through, what I saw, and what I did to make me join the army and make me volunteer for war. Nothing other than this pair of boots right here will ever, ever come close to telling my story. I can sit here for an hour with you guys and I can tell you everything I saw and everything I did in Ground Zero, but nothing can tell you the story better than these boots. And I just wanted to share that with you. You guys are the first people that have ever seen these publicly. The only people who have ever seen my boots are two of my family members and 3 other people. That's it. Have ever seen those boots. And so that's why it's kind of important for me on a day like this to bring them out and show them to you, because if you are considering forgetting Ground Zero, if you're not paying attention to what today means, if you seem to not care, if you're taking a knee for that national anthem, remember what you're kneeling for. Remember why. Because today is truly a day to never ever forget. To never forget. There's no politics, there's no red, there's no blue. There's no anything. There's no liberal, there's no Republican, there's no Democrat, there's no divisiveness. There's no anti-unity. There's no any single lives matter. Nothing comes close to mattering than when you turn on the TV and it's 9/11 and they say, never forget. I'm Donnie B all day. Never forget.